hopefully I'm in the frame. Let me spread out so that just in case I'm not in the frame. So I put everything is written down here because I wanted to make sure that I covered Let's see how this takes us. Okay, so high level items. For people who are just, you just stumbled on this channel, what exactly am I saying? What exactly am I talking about? So in all seriousness, on the 1st of December 2023, I decided to go on a road trip across West Africa. I did this spontaneously in the sense that I hadn't planned it. But the main reason I decided to do it was I realized that even if I'm Nigerian, I grew up in Nigeria, lived in Nigeria for most of my life, I think. Because I need to start, most of my life. Lived in Nigeria for most of my life. I still hadn't traveled extensively across West Africa. I hope I'm in the frame. Sometimes I'm just going to pause here just to make sure I'm in the frame. So the first thing I'll say is travel slow. I say travel slow for a couple of reasons. Number one thing being that travel around the region generally is slow by default, right? But also it's tiring, especially if you choose to go by road as well. Now, as we go along, you'll find out that I didn't only do road. So I had a combination of road, air, and water. So, and there were many reasons for this. I remember flying from from Bamako to Dakar because the road trip from Mali to Senegal looked like an absolute, I don't want to say nightmare, but it just looked like something I absolutely did not want to do. So that's it. Anyway, but generally I did travel slow. I ended up spending, by the time this is done, I would have ended up spending 50 days on the road, maybe 60, who knows. Okay, so the first thing I'll say is make sure you travel slow, or at least don't stress yourself. I've seen people try and cover 7 countries in 2 weeks. Now, of course, it's possible that you have time constraints and things like that, and that's fine. But if you have 2 weeks, I would say, why don't you do 4 countries, right? Instead of trying to do 7 in 2 weeks, because you'll be exhausted. You won't have time to take in the country. Just moving in rapidly through the country is not exactly my style. Again, like I said, travel is slow by default. So you don't want to end up stressed, right? So yeah. The second question that people would ask me that the second question I wanted to talk about, people don't, let me say the truth, nobody has asked me this, but there's something I feel that I should mention. So at the time I started this road trip, I actually didn't have a passport. What I mean by that is, of course I have a passport, right? But I didn't have access to my passport because my passport was with an embassy at the time. And my friend had mentioned that she was going, that's where this whole thing started from. My friend had mentioned that she was going to West Africa. So she was going to Togo. And I was like, oh, that's nice. I'll come. So I literally just invited myself to her trip, even if I ended up not going with her. But that was where I decided that, you know what, let me just do a whole West Africa thing. Now, the problem was my passport, which ended up arriving on the day that I left Lagos, was not back from the embassy. And I said, okay, I can't wait anymore. So I decided to get an ECOWAS travel certificate, which at the time I assumed was a passport, but it's not a passport. When I received it, it was ECOWAS certificate. It was very easy to get in Nigeria. It took about 24 hours from the Lagos passport office. And yeah, it was pretty easy. So that was the only documentation I had. But I had also read somewhere, well, not read somewhere, I think it was an Instagram video about making sure you carry your NIN identity card, not sleep. Now, a lot of Nigerians have like the sleep, but I decided like that particular video, the comments under that particular video, it was just a random Instagram video, to be honest. The comments under that video had said something about the fact that you could print the ID card itself. And I said, okay, you know what, I'll do this. So I went online. I think it cost me around 1,200 naira. And then I was able to get like an ID card slip that I printed and laminated and carried as an ID card. So again, this was very helpful in hindsight, because I found out that some countries were a bit iffy about the ECOWAS certificate, but when I presented the NIN card, they were fine with it. I also found out that I couldn't use the ECOWAS certificate because really it wasn't an ID card, right? Even if technically it is. Oh, sorry, it's not a passport, but technically it's an ID card. I found a bit of trouble using it to receive money from Western Union, and I'll talk about this when I talk about money. But the NIN ID card was fine when I used it to receive money from Western Union. So another big high level item I would like to discuss is transportation. Ask the locals, right? Because for a lot of these places that I went to, I was deciding how to move as I got into the country. And from my experience, that's kind of like the best way to do it. One of the things you want to do is be flexible, obviously, but the first thing you want to do is, once you get to a place and then you're trying to get to another place, just ask the locals, okay, I am currently in Senegal, in Dakar, I'm trying to go to the Gambia, what's the best way to do it? And they would give you, and make sure you ask like multiple people, ask taxi drivers, they kind of know as well, hotel staff, where the host, wherever you're staying, people that would ordinarily see a lot of travelers, right? So ask them, they know stuff. And I also found out very quickly that things change around, many of these places. So somewhere that you must have read a couple of years ago was where you could get like a car to somewhere, by the time you get to that place it doesn't exist anymore, or has changed, or things like that. So you also want to make sure that you get current information, and the most valuable, authentic, most of the time the most correct information you will get is from the locals. So make sure you ask them, no matter what you're doing. If you're flying, swimming, or walking, start early. For every time I had left a place, one of my things was that I don't want to get there at nightfall, right? So I always made sure that I started as early as possible. And it's just nicer because you can see the sights, you have a bit of daylight, and you can just see things as they're happening. And then when there were cases where I would have to, let's say the journey was above, I don't know, it was going to get me to my destination in the dark, I would rather break it, right? So instead of doing a 20 hours journey, can I break it into 15, 10, something like that, just so that I don't have to travel at night. I did travel at night once, and I believe it was when I was going, but it was overnight, so it wasn't bad. We slept on the bus and then woke up, and I believe it was the Togo to Ouagadougou one. And the Togo to Ouagadougou one, even if it was 20 hours, that's what they said, but it ended up taking us like 27. Even if it was that amount of hours, it was a very, very comfortable, and I'm going to put the name of the transportation company in the link below. It was a very, very comfortable ride, so didn't mind it at all. So transportation, yes, ask the locals, start early, understand the routes. Now, what I mean by that is, regardless of wherever you're going, you want to make sure that you have an idea at least of what the route looks like, right? And what I mean by that is, where is the car, bus, ferry, whatever you're taking, where is it going? Just look at it on the map, just be a little familiar with it. Nothing, just so you know where you're going. And then finally, on transportation, follow your instincts. There was a time I was a bit desperate because I was traveling over the holidays, and I was trying to get from Senegal to the Gambia, and there was this particular car I looked at this car, even if it was the car that everybody uses. I was just like, I'm not going to get into that car. I mean, I was going to get into the car if it was the only option available. But luckily, for us, the group I was with, group of people I met at the park actually, another bus came and it was a lot better, and I was just like, yes, that's it. But generally, for your follow your instincts with with transportation, just generally, if you don't feel comfortable in a particular vehicle, you don't have to take it. And then the fourth high level item is money. So I started with cash, and I was when I was leaving Nigeria. I'm not going to mention the amount I had, but to me it was a substantial sum. And I remember my friend saying, "Are you sure you don't want to take five times that?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? There's no way I can spend this money." That money finished in Togo, which was the only second country I went to. Now, for two reasons. Number one, they stole $300 from me in the hotel, which is the story. $350 from me in the hotel that I stayed in, and then for some funny reason, I bought quite a bit of stuff in Togo. I don't even know. Bad idea, because I ended up logging all those stuff with me all through. One of the things that I realized is that what I should have done better is everything I bought in Togo, I should have just left it in the hotel and asked them to help me. Anyways, after they stole from me, I guess we didn't have a good relationship. But ideally, I could have just sent those things just back to Lagos, right? Instead of lugging it around West Africa, which was fine at the end of the day, because the things I bought, I ended up using them as gifts, to like housekeeping, to a driver that was really nice to me in all of the places that I went to, a new friend that I made. So at the end of the day, I didn't really come back with too many of the stuff that I bought. But yeah, so it kind of worked out. So yeah. Anyway, so in terms of money, have cash, and then also have like creative places to put your cash. I realized that USD works better. One of the mistakes that I made, which I think is important to talk about, is, am I speaking too fast? Let me calm down. Okay. So one mistake that I made was I went to Western Union in the Gambia, and then I took, because obviously Western Union will give you local currency, and I had a lot of Dalasi. It was like equivalent of, like, well, not a lot, but it was like $500 equivalent in Dalasi. And I forgot, not like I forgot, but I didn't change the money at the border. I'm not sure what I was thinking, but I just didn't change it. I changed just a little bit, maybe like equivalent of like $100 or something like that, thinking that I could change it when I get to, to leave Gambia. So Gambia, then I got to Senegalese border. I didn't change it. I was thinking, oh, when I get to where I was going to, which was, where was I going to from there? This wasn't too long ago, more. Guinea-Bissau. When I get to Guinea-Bissau and I'm settled, I'll change it. And it was like, okay, as in, when I got to Guinea-Bissau, they're like, oh, sorry, we don't change Dalasi, which makes sense because there's a whole country between, Guinea-Bissau and the Gambia, which is Senegal, right? So why didn't I change? Anyways, I had a lot of Dalasi and I just didn't know what to do with it. If you're going to the Gambia anytime soon, reach out to me. I would give you a fair rate of my Dalasi. Anyway, so that's that. So in moving across the countries, I think that you can always change dollars, pounds, euros. So make sure that if you're going to have cash, then that's that. SEFA is also fine because you can also, always change SEFA, but obviously, yeah, having those currencies sad, but that's what it is. So if you're coming from Nigeria, for instance, like I was, you change your naira to USD. You get what I mean? And then you just have the third thing, budgets. Have a rough. Funny enough, I'm not a budget traveler, but I have a budget for my trip, if that makes sense. So what I kind of do is that I'll just be like, okay, yeah, of course it makes sense, right? So I'm just like, okay, I had a budget of I believe at the time it was $1,000 a week. That's inclusive of hotels, things like that, which at the end of the day for some countries was too conservative. But I found out that it was fine for most of the places that I went to. So that's what my budget was. This is my own personal budget. And then I could go up and down depending on the situation of things and my pocket. So just have a rough estimate of how much you want to spend per week or per country or whatever it is, and then just make sure that I wrote down everything single thing I spent money on, just because I also wanted to see, categorically how I was spending money. But just looking at a lot of my data, or looking at my data, a lot of my expense actually went into accommodation, which I will talk about next. And then I spent quite a bit on transportation, because for certain places I just didn't want to get like in an uncomfortable car, so I would get like a private driver to take me to the next place. It worked out fine for me, but it was also expensive. And then another thing I also did with money was P2P. For people who follow me on Twitter, I'd kind of talked about this before, where I quickly found out that I'm Nigerian and there are Nigerians all over West Africa, right? So I would go to the markets, ask for a Nigerian, give them Naira, they give me the local currency. That was fantastic. But I also did, if you're crypto savvy, I also did, P2P with crypto as well. So that's something that you can also do as well. So that's that about money. I know that the money question is very, very sensitive. I'm going to answer the next question that is probably on your lips, like, how much did I spend? Now, one of the things I believe with travel is that travel budgets are expandable. You can spend, like, two people can go to the same place and one person spends $300 and that person spends $3,000. So was this trip, will I categorize it as an expensive trip? I would say for me, yes. And this was, of course, because of the way I like to travel. Because I was working remotely and working full-time during that, I needed comfort, stable internet, places that were accessible, those kind of things. And seeking those comforts in some of these countries are overpriced. And the reason I found out that the reason for that is because you have a lot of expats and aid workers, kind of distorting the market. So those things are exclusive, and like a hotel like this, which is just basic, cost me $200 a night, right? And it's a fantastic hotel, but I won't pay $200 a night for a place like this in somewhere in Europe or maybe the Middle East or something. You know what I mean? But that's kind of like what you get. So accommodation. So speaking of accommodation, that was one of my biggest expense. Accommodation, hotels are generally expensive. So if you want to do this trip on a budget, I would say figure out accommodation. One thing that I found when I was doing my research before I started the trip is that a couple of people actually use couch surfing. And once you can do this, you cut out a lot of expense. Now, for some people, they're like, oh, I can't couch surf, and that's fine. Another thing you can also do is do this in a group. So that way I figure that if I had split accommodation costs with someone or a group of people, it would have made my life a lot less expensive. So yeah, but just expect that. And then another thing I quickly found is Airbnb works. There was no country I went to that didn't have Airbnb. I think the only place that I was curious where I didn't find a lot of Airbnb options was Guinea-Bissau. And I'm not sure if it's because of the language, because I also didn't find many things on booking.com as well. So maybe because of the language barrier, because Guinea-Bissau is Portuguese speaking and a lot of their tourists come from Portugal. So it's possible that they have another set of platforms that they use for accommodation, but legit, I found just five options on Airbnb and maybe three options on like booking.com, and I found that weird for an entire country. But yeah, that's what happened. So then another thing is, I would say make sure you have travel insurance and then pay attention to your body. I was feeling a kind of way in Burkina Faso, and I went to the hospital, ran some tests, extended my stay in Burkina Faso by a couple of days because I was, paying attention to my body. So I would say no matter what you do, um, have travel insurance that covers, health, and then pay attention to your body, take things slow. In terms of, I'm just rushing through the remaining things now because because it's almost time for dinner and he's gonna eat. Anyway, so activities, I would say figure out the kind of experience that you want and then sort of curate your own activities around that. If you want nature, then you go and look for the nature. If you want the beaches, if you want to focus on the arts, if you want to focus on food, West Africa is beautiful and it's so diverse. So just figure out for yourself the kind of experiences that you want and then just curate it according to that, really. Each place has its own charm, and yeah, it's an amazing experience. One thing I also say is walking around, I didn't find a lot of activities like, how you go to places and then you'll see like activities on like different platforms. I didn't find that here. But one thing that was really helpful to me, and it's something I always do in most countries, is walking around. If I'm not, if the walking tours are available, I take them. If not, I just walk around myself. And I find, like, it was when I was walking around in Guinea-Bissau that I found out that there's a huge skating community, young skaters, very interesting. And every evening I'll just walk there to just go and see them. So I do think that that's also very important as well. Just walking around and just taking your time. It looks like I'm done. Okay. Hopefully this video was useful. This is just the first in the series. I promised that I would do the each country. So let's just talk about them together. So the first one was Togo, and then from Togo to Burkina Faso. And in Burkina Faso, I went to two places, which was Ouagadougou and then Bobo Dioulasso. And I really like Bobo Dioulasso. I liked it so much because I made a lot of friends there. And then from Burkina Faso, from Bobo Dioulasso, I went to Bamako. And then from Bamako, I went to Senegal. From Senegal, I went to the Gambia, my absolute fave. And then from there to Bissau, Guinea-Bissau, from there to Guinea-Conakry, and then to Freetown. So I'm going to do, Sierra Leone. So I'm going to do a video on each of these countries, vlog style for the most part. And then, yeah. So this is just an intro, and then see you in the next of the series. Bye.